Right, let's just jump straight into this explainer. And we're starting with a surprisingly dark origin story. Picture this, a condemned man facing a firing squad in Utah. Asked for his final words, Gary Gilmore doesn't hesitate. He just shrugs and says, "Let's do it." It's chilling, right? But believe it or not, those 3 words became the unlikely spark for a massive global empire.
Fast forward a few years, and an advertising copywriter named Dan Whedon just couldn't shake the sheer nerve of that phrase. So he tweaks it. He changes one word, drops the rest, and boom, he hands Nike a 3-word philosophy that literally changes the trajectory of commerce forever. I mean, Just Do It ended up selling the dignity of effort to everyone, from an 80-year-old on a morning walk to an elite marathoner.
So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're decoding the source material from Jan Mauro's fascinating book, Selling Victory. We're pulling back the curtain to see exactly how 2 guys selling Japanese sneakers out of the trunk of their car built a staggering $46 billion meaning-making machine. Honestly, it's a masterclass in why selling a feeling is infinitely more profitable than just selling a product. Think about it. How often do you buy something just for the way it makes you feel? Today, we're going to see exactly how that feeling gets manufactured.
We have a brilliantly structured journey ahead of us. We'll be hitting 6 main pillars: the business of meaning, selling the feeling, minting heroes into myths, the universal pitch, the economics of controversy, and finally, the cost of myth.
All right, part 1, the business of meaning, from the trunk to the swoosh.
Let's take it back to the early days. You've got Phil Knight hustling, selling Japanese sneakers from his car trunk to serious runners. And his partner, track coach Bill Bowerman, is famously ruining his wife's waffle irons, just trying to invent lighter, grippier soles. The magic combo here was their division of labor. Knight sold the feeling of aspiration, and Bowerman's relentless engineering made it believable. But wow, they almost killed the vibe before they even started. Knight actually wanted to name the company Dimension 6. Yeah, an incredibly clunky, descriptive name. Thankfully, they pivoted to an evocative name, Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. See, a descriptive name kind of boxes you in, but an evocative name, it has this infinite emotional capacity that can stretch across any sport, any era.
Of course, that killer name needed a logo, and they got one for exactly $35. That's all graphic design student Carolyn Davidson was paid to draw the now famous swoosh. But the genius wasn't just getting a cheap logo. The genius was that this empty, abstract checkmark was basically a blank vessel. Nike spent the next 5 decades pouring meaning into that vessel, making these massive cultural deposits through iconic athletes until a $35 doodle became absolutely priceless.
Moving into part 2, Sell the Feeling, the playbook and the pitfalls.
Okay, here's the absolute most crucial point to understand about this company. Nike doesn't actually sell shoes. I mean, at the end of the day, a shoe is just rubber and glue, right? They sell who you let them help you become. They sell identity. But forgetting that almost destroyed them in the 1980s. It's a perfect example of something called identity capture. Nike got so hyper-focused on their serious, purist running culture that they completely ignored the massive explosion of women's aerobics. They kind of wrote it off as not a real sport. Well, Reebok swooped in and temporarily stole the crown just by paying attention. They sold the feeling those customers actually wanted, to feel energetic, attractive, and social. Nike was basically playing the right game with totally wrong metrics.
So, to survive that Reebok scare and build the empire we know today, Nike took a massive step back. They codified this brilliant 4-move playbook that they've essentially just run on repeat for over 60 years. Step 1, sell the feeling, not the product. Step 2, mint human heroes into myths. Step 3, pick fights and take a stance to create fierce loyalty. And finally, Step 4, own the story and own the channel.
Which brings us to part 3, mint heroes into myths, the human infrastructure. Because, let's face it, abstract feelings are really hard to sell on their own. Nike figured out early on that if they wanted to sell a feeling at scale, they needed charismatic human beings who completely embodied that feeling. They needed a bridge between the rubber shoe and the customer's dream, and that leads to the biggest bet in sports history. They staked a massive chunk of their budget on a completely unproven rookie named Michael Jordan. They were hoping for maybe $3 million in sales. Instead, they pulled in a mind-blowing $126 million in year 1, and they threw gasoline on that fire by leaning hard into their outsider ethos. When the NBA banned Jordan's black and red shoes, Nike rebelliously paid his fines. They took a boring regulatory headache and flipped it into the ultimate story of the forbidden object.
As the brand exploded, Nike got incredibly smart about sequencing these myths. They proved that this emotional transfer is super flexible. It can channel the pure, gritty guts of a runner like Steve Prefontaine, the awe-inspiring greatness of Jordan, the delightful humor of Bo Jackson, or the barrier-breaking social meaning of a young Tiger Woods. They weren't just renting spokespeople for a quick ad. They were literally compounding these human myths over decades.
All right, part 4, the universal pitch, expanding the empire.
Now, you can't build a global empire on elite aspiration alone. To truly take over, Nike had to figure out how to talk to the rest of us, the slow joggers, the busy parents, the casual gym goers, and entirely different cultures that didn't care at all about American basketball. Enter those 3 magic words. Just do it. Was the universal permission slip. It sold the dignity of effort to everyone. It worked as a taunt to the pro athlete, but also a welcoming handshake to the total beginner. And because it wasn't chained to one specific sport, Nike's market share violently exploded from 18% to 43% in just a single decade. It dug an emotional moat that competitors simply couldn't cross.
But global expansion wasn't a total breeze. Nike actually learned the hard way that you can't just copy-paste your American male pitch everywhere else. You have to put in the work of true empathy. For women, that meant pivoting away from the idea of greatness and focusing on autonomy and physical protection, which they did beautifully with the If You Let Me Play campaign. And in global football, a market totally dominated by Adidas, Nike had to drop the American individualistic swagger. They had to genuinely embrace the spontaneous joy and artistry of the game to finally earn cultural permission there.
Let's move to part 5, the economics of controversy, the most dangerous play. Okay. This is where it gets super fascinating. It's their highest wire act, is where they take everything they've learned and weaponize social and political stances to manufacture intense, unbreakable loyalty. And look, keeping in mind we are strictly analyzing the business mechanics here, not endorsing any politics either way. Nike's core thesis was brilliant. Being inoffensive creates a weak brand. Mild approval just doesn't sell premium sneakers, but drawing a line in the sand, purposely angering people outside your target market to thrill the people inside it, that creates religious devotion.
Think about when Nike made Colin Kaepernick the face of their 30th anniversary. It was a perfect execution of 4 specific rules. They willingly traded the anger of older, non-core customers for the fierce loyalty of their young, diverse base. And because Nike had spent 30 years cementing this defiant outsider image, the stance felt completely authentic to the brand. In fact, all the outrage from opponents, it just validated the stance to their core audience. It was basically free, incredibly credible marketing.
Which brings us to our final section, part 6, the cost of myth, when the story breaks.
Here's the catch, though. Building an empire purely on meaning, empowerment, and values comes with a pretty severe structural vulnerability. Eventually, the public is going to measure your corporate reality against your pristine advertising copy. And when those 2 things don't match up, the foundation shakes. As the source material points out, this is the great contradiction of Nike. They brilliantly package the catharsis of social justice and empowerment as a consumer product. You buy the shoes and you get to feel like a rebel. But the actual workers manufacturing those products overseas have historically faced some pretty grim contradictory realities. It shines a light on the uncomfortable truth that a brand can sell empowerment without always practicing it behind closed doors.
And that leaves us with one final provocative thought to chew on. The Nike playbook, from selling the feeling to minting myths, all the way to weaponizing controversy, is undoubtedly the greatest marketing machine ever built. But as consumers, we have to decide for ourselves. Is the profound meaning they're selling us actually real, or is it simply the most expertly crafted illusion in the history of commerce? Definitely something to think about the next time you lace up.